From the moment I was old enough to know the purpose of school, I understood pretty clearly that the only goal I needed to have was to get a well-paying corporate job. A job where you consecrate about 30 to 40 years of your life working for one company for the promise of pensions and retirement. And honestly, that's the only thing the school system was really concerned about. So of course, when I followed everything that I was told, I did magnanimously well. Went to the best schools there are. Ugh. Imagine doing all of this and then finding yourself in the corporate world. Finally, the goal that they told you should be working hard for. You find yourself with that corporate job that isn't paying very well, but it's still a corporate job. You've gotten the corporate job. And it's like the worst nightmare. That is exactly what happened to me. And you know, the funny thing is that once you find yourself in this unfavorable environment that is nothing like the dreams you are being sold, you're just expected to just go with the flow. You should just do it because everyone else is doing it. But I'm like, no. Why should I just accept something just because you accepted it? But also, why is it that a lot of the adults always lie to a lot of young children about the future that is awaiting them? I think this is the problem here, because if we were really being honest about what the future entails, then children would be well prepared for that future. This idea where you are selling fantasies to children so that you can push them to do well in school, and then once they leave school and they realize that they were lied to, instead of taking responsibility for that and even finding ways of guiding these young adults, all of a sudden these people were selling you these false ideas, these fantasies. They're the ones that are mocking you. They're the ones that are calling you lazy. They're the ones that are making fun of your burnout. They're making fun of your depression. They do not want to take responsibility for the fact that they're the ones that actually got you to this place where you feel so confused. Anyway, today I really want to talk about the corporate world, the 9-to-5 job. When I look at it from a bird's eye view, I have not had good experiences in the corporate world. Sure, there have been pros and cons, but the overall have actually been disadvantages. I've actually worked in the corporate world in both Kenya and France, so I definitely think I have ample experience to speak about this. One of the things that I really do not like about the corporate world is meetings. My goodness, the number of meetings that exist in this world is just something that I just fail to comprehend. I really don't understand, because a lot of these meetings are actually very useless, for lack of a better word. And it's actually worse the more you climb the ladder. The CEOs, the managers, most of them don't even do any work other than just hopping from one meeting to another. I remember there was a point where we had meetings from like 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. What do you mean? You know, the funny thing, those meetings are not counted as work, but at the same time, you're expected to attend those meetings. If you don't attend those meetings, suddenly you're not a team player. And yet most of those meetings could just be emails, or it could just be a conversation between a manager and the team supervisor. It didn't need to be a whole departmental meeting. You know, the funny thing is that a lot of people always say that influencers don't even work. I don't even understand why they're paid a lot of money. But you know who else doesn't work? A lot of people in the corporate world. And that's why you find a lot of people are so unsatisfied with their own jobs, because a lot of the things that they're doing are very useless. They're not contributing to anything, not to their well-being, not to the well-being of others, not to the well-being of society, not to the well-being of the planet. It's just a bunch of useless nothings. That's a lot of the work that we have in this world today. You know, it's even worse when you're working from home. I don't know who gave people this idea that when you work from home it's easier. No, when you're working from home, then you have to deal with all those meetings. My goodness, it's actually better for you to just go into the office. One of my pet peeves when it comes to online meetings is these people who pretend that, oh my god, I don't know how to use the video and the audio function. Get a grip. We cannot be serious. You cannot be calling yourself a manager and you don't know how to use these online tools like Zoom. I mean, we've gotten to a point where that is completely unacceptable. This idea that, oh, you know, older generations, they don't understand these things. Get a grip. We've been in the technological age for a very long time. There's absolutely no reason why you are calling people to an online meeting and you don't even know how to use these online tools. If you cannot do that, which is the bare minimum, it definitely means that you should not be having that job. This brings me to the next point about why corporate world, the 9 to 5, is actually so depressing, and it's something I call the ego Olympics. Many other people call it office politics. I spoke about this before in one of my earlier videos where the subject matter was about thriving in the corporate environment. Unfortunately, office politics is something that even if you do not like, you have to participate in if you really want to go really farther in your corporate career. Is it something that a lot of people enjoy? No. But is it something that you have to participate in? Yes. And is it draining? Absolutely. And one of those is just what I was speaking about, this idea that, oh my God, this older manager doesn't know how to use Zoom. We are going to pretend that is absolutely normal for a manager not to know how to do these things, because we need to be on his good side. This is something that actually bugs me, because what do you mean? Didn't you take some time before the meeting to try and understand that online platform? Just remembering all those things is really irritating me. This idea of office politics is really about reducing yourself to make other people feel comfortable, and most importantly, the people who are in positions of power. It's about overexerting yourself to show how useful you are, and most times you even have to do things that have nothing to do with your job description for them to look favorably on you. I find this to be the most despicable, stupid thing, but unfortunately it is the reality of a lot of the corporate environments. The other thing that is really rampant in the corporate environment is discrimination. One of the things that I've always found to be incredibly astonishing is how a lot of people do not have the capacity to see how the cultures of people, the socializations of people will always manifest at work. I mean, if I take my own example, I'm clearly a woman, and I've always found that, especially in the Kenyan context, this idea that women need to reduce themselves is something that is very rampant, because of course in a place like Kenya, it is a patriarchal society, and the overall societal culture will always manifest in the workplace. So even if you are the most brilliant woman in the room, if you walk with confidence, you'll be called arrogant. If you're someone that is good at their job, you'll be told that you're trying to show off. You're also discriminated based on how you dress. This idea of dressing professionally is also one of those things that comes from colonialism, because it's a way of trying to force people to hide themselves. I don't understand why men with dreadlocks are not allowed to work in a lot of companies because of their dreadlocks, because they are saying that dreadlocks are not professional. But we're working in an African context, and dreadlocks are part and parcel of a lot of African cultures. So of course it's very clear that this idea of how you dress and professional dressing and grooming is something that is heavily borrowed from colonialism, especially in the Kenyan context. One of the things that I still find astonishing to today is the fact that while I also faced discrimination in the French corporate workplace, it was actually less compared to the kind of discrimination that I would face in the Kenyan workplace. I also find that there's a lot of discrimination based on your age, especially in Kenya. When you are a young person in Kenya, the corporate world is like a place of war for you, because a lot of people are seeing you as a threat. They're not seeing you as an asset that could actually help the company or help the team. But I found that that was the complete opposite in France, because they actually have a lot of support for young people, and you're finding that a lot of people in the company, they want to help you to become better. If you have any questions, they are more open to guide you. Another thing that deeply affects the quality of your corporate life is the harassment and the bullying that you face in these places. My goodness. And you know, the funny thing is that they are actually seen as something normal, and even if you go report, you're the one that is going to be seen as the problem. I remember I got an internship at a TV station in Kenya. I mean, essentially I went to university to become a news anchor, so of course it made sense for me to do an internship at a TV station, and I only stayed there for 3 days. And 3 days were enough for me to know that I actually didn't want to become a news anchor. In addition to that, one of the things that really made me quit within 3 days is the bullying. Can you imagine starting to work on the first day and being bullied right from the first day? It was actually a woman who was doing the bullying, and she really hated younger women. And I remember just being like, there is no way I'm going to be staying in such an environment. That's exactly how I decided to forget about being a news anchor, and I went into marketing. The other thing that drove me crazy in the corporate environment micromanagement. My goodness, I am a firstborn. That needs to be self-explanatory, because yes, I've grown up in a high pressure environment where I was always expected to have answers for everything, even though I was a child. And so I grew up to be an adult that is strategic, that is extremely understanding, that has high emotional intelligence, that is extremely smart, that is independent, that is a creative problem solver. And suddenly I'm finding myself in a corporate environment where I have a manager who wants to micromanage every single thing I'm doing. I'm like, excuse me, I'm not a child. First of all, I am here because I'm qualified to do this job. So I don't understand why you're asking me every 2 seconds, is this done? Is this done? I know exactly how to manage my time. I know exactly when to loop you into my workflow. So I don't understand why you were literally not letting me work and you were just wasting my time trying to micromanage me. And actually, the more I understand how a lot of men think, the more I understand the concept of micromanagement. I have noticed that a lot of men, they don't go out of their way to do things. They have to be told to do something. See, if you want something to move from this area to this area, if you don't tell them, they're not doing it. That actually makes a lot of sense why micromanagement exists in the corporate world, because this world was mainly created for men. And in a lot of countries, it is still male dominated. And a lot of these men, they need that micromanagement for things to move forward. But that is actually a huge disadvantage for a lot of women, because the way we are socialized, again, we're always taught to be the ones that are always thinking about what other people need, to always look forward, to become the visionary. And this is why you're finding in a lot of marriages, a lot of women just feel so exhausted, because again, when you're partnering with a man who has never really been taught about thinking ahead, thinking of how to even solve problems before they happen, that becomes the sole responsibility of the woman in that marriage. And that is a lot of emotional labor, a lot of psychological labor. And that's why a lot of the times as women we are told that, oh, you're being too much, you're exaggerating something. Again, because a lot of these people that are saying this, they do not have the skill of actually seeing ahead and seeing how things could pan out. But as women, we're actually socialized to have that skill. You should be able to think ahead, to think about other people, think about how they will feel, so that you can show up in a way that makes other people very comfortable. And of course, something that complements micromanagement is gaslighting. My goodness, the level of gaslighting in corporate environments is just on another level. And this is something that I've seen both in Kenya and France. And this comes down to the idea of ego Olympics, office politics. Because a lot of people in the corporate world, they're people who hold these job titles so dearly because they think that is what defines them. Even when they do something wrong, they're not going to own up to it because they feel like it's an attack on them. They feel like it's going to reflect negatively on them. Instead of just understanding that, well, when you work, sometimes you fail, and that's okay. People who really view failure in a negative way, unfortunately, this is a lot of people in the corporate world. And that means that if anything goes wrong, they are going to try and pin that failure on one person in the team, and they will gaslight that person or several people. Most times the interns and the junior employees will gaslight you until you think that it is your fault, that something went wrong, even when you actually were not part of that project. The moment you find yourself being gaslighted over and over, and this is actually a rite of passage for a lot of people, you get so gaslighted, you lose confidence in yourself. You start doubting yourself. And this is something that is going to break you for the rest of your life if you actually don't remove yourself from that situation. And unfortunately, this is what happens to a lot of people. And you know, as a young person, you just leave university and then you just go straight into a lot of this corporate worlds, and they just break you and break you and break you. And that's why you find that a lot of people don't even have the courage to leave these toxic environments, because you're actually molded to accept this toxicity, and eventually you become the toxic person if you're not very careful. Another horrible thing in the corporate world is the fact that you're actually punished for having or even wanting a work-life balance. I've seen a lot of conversations of people about, oh, quiet quitting, just do the bare minimum at work. But if we're really being honest, that doesn't work for a lot of companies. Reality is that most of the people that are working in these jobs do not have a work-life balance. It doesn't exist. You don't have time for your family, for friends, for anything else. You just need to be thinking about work. The idea that you're always expected to be on standby. If someone calls you at midnight on a Sunday, you need to be able to take that work call. If you're the kind of person that cares about leaving the office at 5 because your contract says 9 to 5, of course you can do that. But know very well that in a lot of companies, that is going to be taken into account in your performance review. You're going to be told that you're not serious. You'll be told that you're rejecting the company culture. The last thing, I would say this is actually deeply personal to me just because of how I work and the kind of person that I am. It's the fact that a lot of companies do not want to take risks. They don't value creativity. They always just want to copy what others are doing. I say this is deeply personal because I am not looking at what other people are doing and copying that in my own life. I like experimenting with things to find out what I like. I like trying things. I like learning about things. I like going into areas that nobody else has ever gone to. I'm not afraid. But that is not how a lot of companies work. They do not want to innovate. They do not want to be the first going into a different sector or industry. They want to wait and see whether someone succeeds in it. And then they want to now copy what that person did. And that's why you're always hearing a lot of people saying that, oh, this area is saturated. At the end of the day, when you look at the population of the world right now, a lot of the industries that you might be interested in are actually very saturated with people. But at the same time, there are new players that are always winning in these saturated industries. Why? Because they dare to do things differently, because they're not fazed by the fact that there are a lot of people, because they believe in themselves. They believe in the different things that they're bringing into the said industry, the different market. I'm that kind of person. That's why working in companies where the leadership of the company doesn't really want to take risks, it's absolutely not my vibe, and unfortunately that's the majority. That definitely means that for someone like me, if I'm ever to go back into the corporate world, I really do have a limited choice, because finding these companies that embody the DNA I use in my own life, it's not easy. Now, when I look back at my own experiences in the Kenyan corporate scene and the French corporate scene, I must say that working in France is actually the better option, because one, there's less discrimination as a woman. Of course, you get discrimination for being African, because a lot of those people, they see Africa as inferior, but it's just not as much. In Kenya, there is a lot of discrimination on you being a woman, on you being a young person, and then if you're a smart young person, oh my God. And for me, I really don't understand this idea of tolerating discrimination in your own country. I can accept tolerating that in somebody else's country, but in my own country, that is completely unacceptable. I definitely say that in general, the corporate world has been pretty disappointing. I mean, when I look at what was being sold, the idea that was sold to me, especially when I was younger, and the reality, they're two different things. And of course, there are people who are like, oh, you are adult now, you should stop thinking about the past is gone, you should look forward. Even if we look at it like that, I mean, there's nothing really interesting about the corporate world. A lot of the jobs are just useless. They're not helping anyone, not helping the planet, not helping society, and you're using your entire day working in a company that doesn't even care for you. They don't see you as human beings, they just see you as robots. That's why this idea of AI is going to take your jobs is something that is being vocalized highly by a lot of corporate CEOs. They just want workers that are going to be there on call 24/7. That's their dream. Even if we overlook all these reasons that I've given in this video, at the end of the day, the corporate world doesn't see human beings as human beings. It just wants your labor, but actually it doesn't want you. And that is exactly why it is so depressing.